As the auto industry promises a future of autonomous vehicles, another movement has arisen. The online urbanist movement, popularized by YouTube content creators, has cast a critical eye on our car centric path. Urbanists claim that American car dependent lifestyles are environmentally and financially unsustainable. We will need to invest in rail to build the transportation network of the future. But if we need to rebuild our rail infrastructure, what can we learn from the past? To answer this question, I decided to visit the B&O Railroad Museum's Ellicott City branch to talk with someone who is well versed in the subject.
Hi there. My name is Connor Keneally, and I'm the manager of the B&O Ellicott City Station Museum.
We're so used to cars, they're everywhere in our lives. Most of us don't directly interact with trains or rail infrastructure, so it's easy for someone to ask, why does rail matter?
Well, rail matters, especially in an American context, because it literally built this country. Rail basically tied the United States together. It was a huge part of the nation building project in the 19th century. And that all started with the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad back in the 1820s. Started off when they built the first rail line here between Baltimore to Ellicott City in 1830. But today, rail matters because it is the most efficient way of moving people. It is the most environmentally sustainable way of moving large numbers of people, and it is massively important for sustainable development to focus on rail.
If we are going to transition to rail, what can the past teach us about what to expect?
So when you the history of rail, the history of rail is not an it's a series of transitions. When you move from originally when you move from horse-drawn power, canal power, to steam locomotive-driven power, and this takes time, and it's kind of a transitional period. Now, with electric rail, that is an older technology. The electric rail has existed since the early 20th century. And it's something that we kind of have to focus on. But we have to remember that these transitions aren't easily done, but they have happened before, and they can happen very rapidly. The transition from roads to rails happened very quickly within the American context. Within a generation, the entire nation of the United States was transformed by rail.
But isn't the US too big for high speed rail? How does that shake out historically?
Well, it doesn't shake out historically because the United States rail network built to the United States. One of the greatest projects of the US was the Transcontinental Railroad, which was built in the 1860s, which literally brought the United States together. The United States is a large country geographically, but we do have an extensive rail network. The challenge is investing in that rail network so it's a sustainable and effective way of moving people around. But when you look at it internationally, within the European context, Chinese context, large countries have extensive rail networks with that because they invested in it.
With cars being so dominant, how did they get there? Was it just people choosing cars, or did the auto industry fight against rail?
So when you talk about the auto industry's fight against rail, a lot of it is when you talk about the interurban and streetcar network, where a lot of it was deliberately defunded and dismantled. A lot of it by lobbying and investment by automaking groups. A lot of the decline in passenger rail was actually a reaction by the railroads themselves. Passenger rail was never that much of a profit-making enterprise for the railroads.
Our country is so polarized now, and rail has become a huge culture war issue. Why is this mode of transit so hotly contested?
Well, I think it's a lot of it is because to do rail efficiently means it needs significant investment and it needs coordinated leadership. Generally, that means it needs to be under state ownership. Generally, a lot of people who are against that are people who are more on a libertarian basis, who don't want that kind of state nationalized rail system. Which I do feel is a wider culture issue. Also, it's just a corporate issue as well. The American railroad system is run by the Class 1 railroads. They care more about a profit-making enterprise rather than sustainable transport solutions. So there needs to be a political will to invest in rail. Now, that has happened in recent years with the recent investments of Amtrak, but there is still massive needs for investment to continue in the United States railroad system.
So, what will the future of rail look like?
I see the future of rail is if we are serious about climate change, we need to get focused on sustainable transport solutions. That means investing and rebuilding the rails network. That means increasing passenger rail routes. It means upgrading our existing rail network, and it means making a compromise with the current rail operators to run more passenger services on existing rail lines. The United States has rail infrastructure, it's just not using it efficiently, but it needs to be a political will to be able to do so. So that is a challenge that we have to overcome, and it's not an easy thing to happen, but it is something that we need to do if we want to get people out of cars and into trains.